I want to turn now to the southern border. 10,000 immigrants have arrived in Del Rio, Texas over the last few days. And the FAA has implemented a 2-week temporary flight restriction over the area. So no news drones can get proper footage right now of this unfolding crisis. Glenn's got some thoughts on that and says everyone who cares about journalism should be demanding an explanation. And yet they're not. So let's just frame up the crisis before we get to the ban on the airspace, Glenn. Already, we've got illegal crossings at a 20-year high, 21-plus-year high. Thousands of Haitian immigrants that are down there right now. They crossed the Rio Grande. They're sleeping outdoors under a bridge in South Texas. It's being described as a humanitarian emergency. Customs and Border Patrol is saying this is unprecedented, an unprecedented logistical challenge. They don't know what to do. How are they going to take care of all these people? There's like a bunch of porta-johns. That's about all they have. They have no running water. They got nothing. This in the midst of a time in which in July, we had 200,000 people apprehended at the border. That was a record. In August, we had another 200,000 people apprehended at the border, and only half of those were returned to Mexico. So that's a net of just 200,000 people coming into the United States. And, I'm sure they're being processed right now. In reality, what happens is they say they want asylum. We say, okay, show up for a court proceeding, and only 15% ever get asylum, and then they're released back out into the United States. So the system is completely messed up from the get-go. But this is happening because they believe Biden's going to give them a pass, that they're going to be able to stay in the United States. This is their one chance. Now they're here. We don't know what to do.
Yeah, I mean, there is an element of truth to the argument that in a lot of these countries like Guatemala and El Salvador and Nicaragua, the United States has been interfering in those countries for a long time, often fueling civil wars and over, engineering coups, and that a lot of the suffering that these people confront in these countries can be attributed to the fact that our own government has been a cause, not the only cause, but a cause of instability in that region based on the Monroe Doctrine that we control Latin America. So you can make the argument that we have some responsibility to the people in these countries. Like a lot of people believe we have responsibility to certain people in Afghanistan after having been there for 20 years who we made promises to after destabilizing their country and the like. So that's an argument that I think we can debate about what is our responsibility. Should we be helping those countries? How do we help them? The problem is that this issue of immigration was probably the single most politicized one during the Trump years. Whenever I would try and get answers from people, what is it that Donald Trump has done that is so morally evil that justify these comparisons to like Adolf Hitler that make him the worst president in the world in your view, things that you said about George Bush, but now you like Bush and say that about Trump, they would instantly say his cruelty in terms of his treatment of immigrants. And so Biden made this a big campaign issue. So did the Democrats, saying we need to welcome these people. We need to be more humane to these people. And they heard that message as you should come. If you come, we will welcome you. And you don't need to debate that. That's what they say. And so the Democrats extracted a huge amount of political capital and political gain, manipulating the emotions of these immigrants who are fleeing for a lot of times very good reasons. Their country is drowning in crime and joblessness and all other kinds of problems. They're not evil people for wanting to leave, but the Biden administration played with their emotions by encouraging them to come, but then doing absolutely nothing to process them and hoping, and it turned out that it would be the case, that the media would lose interest in everything that's happening at the border now that Donald Trump is no longer president.
That's exactly right. And she, Kamala Harris, was basically saying, okay, I'll do it. I'll be the person who takes care of the root causes of corruption down in Latin America. And forgive me for not remembering whether it was Guatemala or Ecuador, but she was like,
Guatemala.
And she was like, I will hold, I'll speak truth to power. I will hold you accountable. And the president was like, well, it's not me. I'm good. And then all this corruption started to unfold around him. All these stories started coming out about his corruption. She was like, la, 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 I do not hear a thing. I don't, never mind all that stuff I said. So we're not holding anybody accountable for anything. We're not addressing root causes, and we're not addressing acute results right here at our southern border. It's basically Greg Abbott who's going to have to deal with this by himself.
What's so interesting is the way the politics have changed around immigration is so fascinating to me. When I first started writing about politics in 2005, that was when I kind of transitioned out of being a lawyer into being a journalist. And back then, the idea of what they called comprehensive immigration reform was being championed by George Bush and Dick Cheney. And it was viewed as kind of a plot by the Chamber of Commerce and big business and, international capital to flood various markets with cheap labor in order to undercut unions and undercut the American worker, because people who are pro-business wanted a huge flood of immigrants because they wanted the labor market to be as saturated as possible so that wages would decline. And people on the left, like Bernie Sanders and labor unions, were famously anti-immigrant, as were a lot of civil rights groups, on the grounds that the people who are going to suffer most from this uncontrolled immigration were likely to be African Americans, American citizens who are Black, who are going to lose their jobs as a result of this glut of immigrants. And now it's virtually unmentionable, taboo on the left, to even raise the question of whether it's fair to American workers, the people that the left is supposed to represent, or fair to these immigrants to have this huge flow of thousands and tens of thousands of people and hundreds of thousands of people coming from the region in which I live, South America and Central America, that the United States is completely ill-equipped to handle. And you see a humanitarian crisis, but also the more that enter, the more the American worker is harmed. And the politics have changed so dramatically that if you're a Democrat, if you're a liberal, even if you're on the left, you have to see it through like an identity prism, that either you're a racist or you're in favor of uncontrolled immigration. And I think that's really distorted the debate.